The great throne of Ashkaran had stood empty for 18 long years, and the weight of that emptiness pressed down upon every dragon in the empire. Like a dying star, Emperor Vormaketh sat upon a smaller seat, beside the ancient throne. His scales now faded from brilliant gold to a tired bronze. His eyes clouded with age and grief that would not leave him. He remembered the day his daughter vanished, remembered the burning wreckage of the diplomatic convoy scattered across the void of space, remembered searching for weeks among the debris and finding nothing but ash and silence. The humans had attacked without warning, a group of insurgents who cared nothing for peace treaties or the lives they destroyed. They had killed Princess Kyrithis, or so everyone believed, and with her death, the bloodline of Vextharian moved one step closer to extinction. "My Emperor," spoke High Inquisitor Jaraios, bowing his massive head as he entered the throne room, his black scales gleaming like polished obsidian in the light of 1,000 floating crystals. "The council awaits your decision." Vormaketh lifted his tired eyes to meet those of his oldest servant, a dragon who had lived for 700 years and remembered the ancient wars when their kind had first claimed dominion over the stars. "Tell me again what the seers have found," the Emperor commanded, though he had heard the words a dozen times already. "The blood of Vextharian still lives," Jarios replied, and despite his age and his hatred for false hope, even he could not keep the wonder from his voice. "Somewhere in the galaxy, the sacred bloodline endures, and our scanners can find it if we search far enough. For 18 years, they have believed the princess dead, her egg destroyed in the attack before it could hatch. But the seers had discovered traces of the bloodline still burning like a distant flame in the fabric of space itself. It seemed impossible. Yet the seers had never been wrong in 10,000 years of service to the throne. "Send the seekers," Vormaketh commanded, rising from his seat with joints that cracked and protested. "Send them to every corner of the galaxy, to every world we have touched and every world we have forgotten, and bring my heir home to me before I die." Jaros bowed again, deeper this time, his heart torn between hope and doubt. He had seen too much in his long life to believe in miracles. Yet he had also seen enough to know that the universe held secrets beyond even dragon understanding. "It will be done." "My Emperor," the Seeker fleet launched within the week. 100 ships spreading across, 17 star systems with their genetic resonance scanners humming with power. These devices could detect the bloodline of Vextharian across vast distances, sensing the unique signature that marked every member of the imperial family. They searched abandoned colonies where dragons had once lived. Before moving on to richer worlds, they searched the wreckage of ancient battles still floating in the void. They searched prison stations and trading posts, and every place a stolen egg might have been hidden. Months passed, and then years, and still the seekers found nothing. Many in the council began to whisper that the seers had been wrong, that the bloodline had truly ended with Princess Kyrithis, that the Emperor was chasing ghosts while his empire slowly crumbled around him. But Jaros refused to give up. He took personal command of the search, driving his ship and his crew to the very edges of known space, to regions where no dragon had ventured in centuries. He went to human space. The very thought disgusted him, for he remembered the old wars when humanity had first crawled out of their home system and dared to challenge dragon supremacy. They were such short-lived creatures, burning through their tiny lifespans in a frenzy of activity and chaos, building and destroying with equal abandon, never pausing to consider the weight of eternity. Dragons lived for thousands of years and thought in centuries, while humans barely managed 100 years and thought only of tomorrow. How could such creatures have ever posed a threat to the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known? Yet they had, Jaros admitted to himself. They had fought with a ferocity that shocked the dragon fleets, throwing themselves into battle with no regard for their own survival. adapting and changing their tactics faster than the dragons could respond. The war had ended in a stalemate, neither side able to claim true victory. And since then, the two species had maintained an uneasy peace marked by occasional violence. The attack on Princess Kyrithis had been one such incident. Though the human governments had denied any involvement and blamed it on rogue insurgents, Jarios did not believe them as his ship entered the outer reaches of human space. He felt his old hatred rising like bile in his throat, remembering every dragon who had died at human hands. Every world they had lost to these vermin, but duty overcame disgust. And he pressed on. They came to a world called New Appalachia, a backwater mining colony that barely registered on any map. A place where humans scratched out a living from the rocks and dreamed of nothing greater than survival. Jarios had intended to scan the planet quickly and move on, expecting nothing from such a primitive settlement. Then the scanner screamed. The sound was so loud and so sudden that every dragon on the bridge jumped in shock, their scales bristling with alarm as warnings flashed across every screen. "What is happening?" Jarios demanded, his claws digging into the arm of his command chair. "The bloodline," his scanner operator gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. "We have found it, High Inquisitor. We have found the blood of Vextharian, and it is down there on that human world." Jarios stared at the screen, at the tiny blue dot that marked the location of the signal, and he felt something he had not felt in centuries: fear. For if the heir to the dragon throne was truly on a human world, if they had somehow survived among these creatures for 18 years, then everything he thought he knew about the universe was wrong. "Take us down," he commanded, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart, "and prepare a landing party. For today, we reclaim what was lost." The ship descended through the clouds of New Appalachia, and below them, unaware of the storm about to break over her life, a young woman named Ellie Vance looked up at the sky and wondered why she suddenly felt like everything was about to change. Ellie Vance had spent her entire 19 years on New Appalachia, and she had never once felt like she belonged there. She worked in the scrapyard with her father Marcus, sorting through the wreckage of old ships and broken machinery that drifted down from space like metal rain. And every day she dreamed of something more. "You are doing it again," Marcus called out from across the yard. His weathered face creased with amusement as he watched his daughter stare at the sky. "Dreaming when you should be working." "Sorry, Dad," Ellie replied, tearing her gaze away from the clouds and returning to the pile of scrap before her. "I just have this strange feeling today, like something big is coming." Marcus Vance was not a man given to superstition, but he had learned long ago to trust his daughter's instincts. She had always been different. This girl he had found 19 years ago in the wreckage of an alien vessel that crashed in the hills outside town. He remembered that night like it was yesterday. Remembered cutting through the twisted metal and finding a strange pod inside, a container that looked almost like an egg, cracked open with a tiny infant crying inside. The child had looked human, mostly, though her skin had an odd shimmer to it, and her eyes seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. He had taken her home and raised her as his own, never telling anyone the truth about where she came from. And he had watched her grow into something extraordinary. She could withstand heat that would burn other humans, walking through the forge fires at the refinery without a scratch while others screamed and fled. Her reflexes were faster than anyone he had ever seen, almost like she knew what was going to happen before it did, and she dreamed of fire and stars, waking in the night with visions of worlds she had never visited and memories that could not be her own. "Dad," Ellie said suddenly, her voice sharp with alarm. "Look." Marcus looked up and felt his heart stop. A ship was descending through the clouds, and it was like nothing he had ever seen before. Massive and scaled like the height of some great beast, with wings that spread across the sky and blocked out the sun. Dragons, he had heard stories of them. Everyone had. The ancient race that ruled half the galaxy and looked upon humanity with contempt. But he had never seen one in person. No dragon had visited New Appalachia in living memory. But there was nothing here worth their attention until now. "Get inside," Marcus commanded, grabbing Ellie's arm and pulling her toward their small home. "Hide in the basement and do not come out until I tell you." "What are you talking about?" Ellie demanded, pulling free of his grip with strength that surprised them both. "I am not hiding. I want to see what is happening." "Ellie, please," Marcus begged, his eyes filled with a fear she had never seen before. "You do not understand. Those creatures cannot find you. They cannot know you exist." "Why?" she asked, and in that moment she saw the truth written on her father's face. The secret he had kept for 19 years finally breaking free. "Dad, what are you not telling me?" Before he could answer, the dragon ship landed in the center of town with a thunderous crash that shook the ground. Beneath their feet, hatches opened along its sides, and dragons emerged, actual living dragons covered in scales of black and silver and gold. Walking on powerful legs and carrying weapons that hummed with energy, at their head strode the largest dragon Ellie had ever imagined. His scales black as the void between stars, his eyes burning with ancient fire as he surveyed the terrified humans who fled before him. "I am High Inquisitor Geraeus of the Draconar Empire," the great dragon announced, his voice booming across the town like thunder. "And I seek the one who carries the blood of Vextharian. Bring them to me, and no harm will come to any of you." Silence fell across the town, broken only by the whimpering of frightened children and the distant howl of the wind. Then the dragon's eyes turned toward the scrapyard, toward Ellie, and she felt something stir deep inside her. Something that had been sleeping her entire life. "There," Geraeus breathed, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried across the distance between them. "I have found you at last." He moved toward her with surprising speed for a creature so large, and Ellie found herself rooted to the spot, unable to run, even as every instinct screamed at her to flee, when he stood before her, towering over her small human form. He lowered his massive head and breathed in her scent. Then he did something that shocked every dragon in his company and every human watching. He knelt. "Princess Caerethys," Geraeus said, bowing his head before her, "daughter of Emperor Vermaketh, heir to the throne of Ashkaran. I have searched for you across the stars and through the long years, and at last I have found you." "You have made a mistake," Ellie stammered, backing away from the kneeling dragon. "I am not a princess. I am just a girl from a scrapyard." "I am human. You are not," Geraeus replied, rising to his full height and stunning her with those burning eyes. "You are the child of the sacred egg, the last of the bloodline of Vextharian. Though I confess I do not understand how this is possible." He gestured to one of his subordinates, who stepped forward with a device that pulsed with soft light. "The egg was damaged in the crash," the subordinate explained, running the scanner over Ellie's trembling form. "It bonded with available genetic material to survive. In this case, human DNA. The princess is a hybrid, neither fully dragon nor fully human." Horror spread across Geraeus' face, a disgust so deep that Ellie felt it like a physical blow. "An abomination," he whispered. And for a moment she thought he might strike her down where she stood. But then his expression hardened into something like resignation, and he turned away. "By the sacred laws of the Empire, an heir tainted by foreign blood must be destroyed," he announced to his soldiers. "But the same laws demand that the bloodline be preserved above all else. We face a contradiction that only the Emperor himself can resolve." He looked back at Ellie, and now his eyes held something almost like pity. "You will come with us to Ashkaran, human child, and there your fate will be decided by powers greater than mine." "No," Marcus shouted, stepping between Ellie and the dragons. "You cannot take her. She is my daughter. I raised her." I protected her. Jarius studied the old human with an expression that mixed contempt with reluctant respect. You kept our princess alive when she should have died, he admitted. For that the Empire owes you a debt, but she is not yours to keep. She never was. Ellie looked at her father, at the man who had given her everything, who had loved her despite her strangeness. And she felt her heart breaking, but she also felt something else. A fire burning inside her that whispered of destiny and purpose. And she knew with terrible certainty that her life on this small world was over. I will go with them, she said. And the words surprised her even as she spoke them. But I am not going as your prisoner or your princess. She met Jarius' burning gaze without flinching. I am going as Ellie Vance, daughter of Marcus Vance, a girl from a scrapyard who's going to find out what she really is. And if you or your emperor or anyone else thinks they can decide my fate without my consent, they have another thing coming. For a long moment the dragon stared at her. This tiny hybrid creature who dared to challenge him with fire in her eyes. Then, against all expectations, he laughed. Perhaps, he said, there is more of the dragon in you than I thought. The throne world of Ashkaran was everything Ellie had ever dreamed and everything she had ever feared. Wrapped together in a package of impossible beauty and crushing weight, cities of crystal and gold stretched across continents, their spires reaching toward the heavens like fingers grasping for the stars themselves. Dragons filled the sky in numbers, beyond counting, their scales catching the light of 3 suns and scattering it into rainbows that danced across the clouds. And at the heart of it all stood the imperial palace, a mountain carved into the shape of a coiled dragon. Its eyes formed from windows that blazed with eternal fire. Ellie stood before the great doors of the throne room, wearing robes that the dragons had provided for her, feeling smaller and more out of place than she had ever felt in her life. Remember, Jarius said from beside her, his voice low and surprisingly gentle. Speak only when spoken to bow before the Emperor. And show no fear. I am terrified, Ellie admitted, her hands trembling at her sides. Good, the High Inquisitor replied. Fear keeps us sharp, but do not let them see it, for they will use it against you. The door swung open, and Ellie walked into the court of the Draconer Empire. The throne room was vast beyond comprehension, a cathedral of stone and crystal that could have held a small city within its walls. Thousands of dragons lined the path to the throne, their eyes fixed upon her with expressions ranging from curiosity to disgust to outright hatred. At the far end of the room, seated upon a throne of black stone that seemed to drink in the light around it, sat Emperor Vermaketh. He was ancient beyond measure, his scales faded and cracked with age, his wings folded against his back like tattered banners of a forgotten war, but his eyes were alive with fierce intelligence. And when they met hers across that impossible distance, Ellie felt something stir inside her again. That same fire that had awakened when Jarius first knelt before her approach, the Emperor commanded. And his voice filled the room like the rumble of distant thunder. Ellie walked a long path to the throne, feeling every eye upon her, hearing whispers in the dragon tongue that she somehow understood despite never learning the language. Abomination, some hissed. Half-breed, corruption. Shame, miracle, others whispered. Savior, hope, renewal. When she reached the foot of the throne, she did not bow. The court erupted in outrage, dragons roaring their fury at this insult to their emperor. But Vermaketh raised one ancient claw, and silence fell immediately. You do not bow, he observed. And there was no anger in his voice, only curiosity. I do not know you, Ellie replied, her voice stronger than she had expected. Where I come from, respect is earned, not demanded. More gasps of outrage, but the Emperor only smiled. A slow spreading of his ancient jaws that revealed teeth worn down by millennia. Your mother said something similar when she was young, he said. And Ellie saw pain flash across his features. Old grief that had never healed. She was wild and stubborn and brilliant. And I loved her more than anything in this universe. He leaned forward, studying Ellie with those impossibly old eyes. I see her in you. Despite the human blood that runs through your veins, I see my daughter's fire. I am not your daughter, Ellie said. Though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them, I am Ellie Vance. I was raised by a human on a world you have never heard of. I know nothing of your empire, or your customs, or your bloodline, and yet here you stand, Vermakis replied. The last hope of a dynasty 10,000 years old. Tell me, child, what do you want? The question caught her off guard, for no one had asked her what she wanted since this whole nightmare began. I want answers, she said finally. I want to know who I really am. I want to know why I dream of fire and stars. I want to understand why I've never felt like I belonged anywhere. The Emperor nodded slowly. These answers I can give you. But first we must address the matter of your heritage. He turned to face the assembled court. My daughter's egg was damaged in the attack that killed her. It bonded with human genetic material to survive. And the result is this child who stands before us. Neither fully dragon nor fully human, but something new. An abomination, shouted a voice from the crowd. And Ellie turned to see a dragon even larger than Jairus pushing forward, his scales a deep crimson, his eyes blazing with hatred by our most sacred laws. Such corruption must be destroyed. The bloodline must remain pure. Lord Therax speaks the truth, another voice agreed. And more dragons nodded their massive heads. The laws are clear. The laws also state that the bloodline must be preserved above all else. Countered a different dragon, this one with scales of burnished copper. Her voice calm and measured. I am Admiral Kephoris, and I say that destroying the last heir would be a greater crime than allowing this hybrid to live. The court descended into chaos. Dragons arguing and roaring at each other. Ancient alliances fracturing along lines that Ellie could not understand. She watched them fight over her fate, as if she were not even there, as if her life was merely a theoretical problem to be solved. And something inside her snapped, enough. She shouted, and to her shock, fire erupted from her mouth. A tongue of flame that scorched the ceiling and sent nearby dragons scrambling backward in alarm. Silence fell again, and every eye turned to her. I have listened to you argue about me like I am a piece of property, Ellie said, her voice shaking with rage. I have stood here while you debated whether I deserve to live or die based on laws written thousands of years before I was born. She turned to face Lord Therax, meeting his hateful gaze without flinching. You call me an abomination, but what do you know of me? You have never spoken a word to me, never asked me a single question. You have judged me based on nothing but the accident of my birth. Then she faced the Emperor, and you call me your heir, your hope. But you do not see me. You see the ghost of a daughter you lost 18 years ago. You see what you want to see, not what stands before you. She spread her arms, and for a moment she seemed to glow with inner light. I am not your salvation or your abomination. I am not your princess or your puppet. I am Ellie Vance. And I will not let anyone decide my fate, but me. The court was silent, stunned into stillness by this outburst from a creature they had dismissed as a lesser being. Then Emperor Vermakis began to laugh, a sound that started low and built until it echoed from every wall. Oh, my child, he said when the laughter finally subsided. You are more like your mother than you could possibly know. He rose from his throne, and Ellie saw how much effort it cost him, how his ancient body trembled with the strain. The laws of our people were written to preserve our strength and ensure our survival. He announced to the court, but what is strength? Is it purity of blood, unchanged across millennia? Or is it the fire to stand before a court of dragons and demand respect? He placed one massive claw gently upon Ellie's shoulder. My heir lives, and she carries the fire of Vextharian within her heart. That is all that matters. He looked out at the assembled dragons, at the mixture of shock and hope and anger on their faces. The bloodline continues. In a new form, adapted to survive. Is that not what we have always done? Is that not how we conquered the stars? Admiral Kethforus stepped forward and knelt before Ellie, and after a long moment, other dragons began to follow. Not all of them, Ellie noticed. Lord Therax and his supporters remained standing, their eyes burning with hatred that promised future conflict. But enough knelt. Enough accepted her, and Ellie felt something shift inside her. A door opening to a future she had never imagined. Welcome home. Princess, Vormicus said softly. Now let us begin your education. The war came without warning, as wars often do, sweeping across the outer systems like a wildfire that consumed everything in its path. The Vractari Collective had been waiting for this moment for centuries, watching the Draconer Empire from the shadows, biding their time until weakness showed itself. And what greater weakness could there be than a succession crisis? An aging emperor clinging to life, and an heir who was half human? Their fleets struck a dozen worlds simultaneously, overwhelming the dragon defenders with numbers and ferocity that shocked even the most battle-hardened veterans. Within weeks, they had captured 3 star systems. Within months, they threatened the heart of the empire itself. Ellie watched the reports come in from her quarters in the Imperial Palace, each one worse than the last, each one painting a picture of an empire that had forgotten how to fight. We are losing, Admiral Kethforus admitted during one of their strategy sessions. Her copper scales dulled with exhaustion. Our tactics have not changed in 1,000 years. We meet the enemy in honorable combat. We match their forces with equal numbers. We follow the ancient protocols of war, and they do not, Ellie observed, studying the holographic map that showed the spreading stain of enemy occupation. They strike from ambush. They target civilians. They use deception and trickery. The Admiral spat with disgust. They have no honor. They are winning, Ellie replied simply. The Admiral had no answer for that. 3 months into the war, Emperor Vermaketh summoned Ellie to his private chambers, a place few dragons had ever seen. She found him lying on a bed of heated stones, his breath rattling in his ancient chest, his scales now more gray than gold. I am dying, he said without preamble. The healers say I have weeks at most, perhaps less. Ellie felt grief twist in her chest, surprising her with its intensity. For despite everything, she had grown to care for this ancient creature who had welcomed her when so many others wanted her dead. You cannot die, she said. The Empire needs you. The Empire needs you, Vermaketh corrected, his eyes finding hers with difficulty. I have watched you these past months. I have seen how you think, how you question everything we have always accepted as truth. He reached out one trembling claw to touch her face. You are not like us. You do not think in centuries or follow traditions simply because they are old. You think like a human, fast and flexible, willing to change when change is needed. The court will never accept me as Empress, Ellie protested. Lord Therax has been gathering supporters. Half the nobility thinks I should be executed. Then show them they are wrong, the Emperor replied. Show them what human thinking can do. 2 days later, Ellie stood before the military council with a proposal that made every dragon in the room gasp with shock. You want to take command of a battle group? Lord Therax demanded, his crimson scales bristling with outrage. You, a creature who has never fought in a single battle, who knows nothing of war. I know that we are losing, Ellie replied calmly. I know that our fleets follow the same tactics they have used for millennia. Tactics the enemy has studied and prepared for. I know that if we do not change something, this war will end with the destruction of everything you have built. And what would you change?" Admiral Kethferus asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Ellie activated a holographic display showing the enemy's advance. "They expect us to meet them in direct combat. Force against force, honor against honor. So we will not give them what they expect." She began outlining her plan. And with each word, the dragon's expressions shifted from scorn to confusion to something that might have been hope. "This is madness," Thorax sputtered when she finished. "Ambushes? Deception? Targeting supply lines instead of battle fleets? These are the tactics of cowards and criminals. These are the tactics of survivors," Ellie shot back. "Humans have been fighting wars against superior enemies for our entire history. We have learned that victory does not come from following rules written by others. It comes from adaptability, from creativity, from the willingness to do whatever it takes." She met Thorax's hateful gaze without flinching. "Give me one battle group. Just one, and I will show you what human tactics can accomplish." The council argued for hours. But in the end, Admiral Kethferus threw her support behind Ellie. And that was enough to tip the balance. Ellie was given command of the third battle group, a collection of older ships crewed by dragons, who had been passed over for promotion and forgotten by the Admiralty. They did not want her. She could see it in their eyes when she first stepped onto the bridge of her flagship. But she had not come this far to be defeated by doubt. "I know you do not trust me," she told them, her voice carrying across the command deck. "I know you think this is a mistake, and maybe you are right. But I also know that we are losing this war, and if we keep doing what we have always done, we will keep getting the same results." She looked at each of them in turn. "I am asking you to try something new, to fight in ways that feel wrong and strange, to trust a half-human creature who has no business commanding a warship. And in return, I promise you this. I will fight beside you. I will die beside you if it comes to that. And I will never ask you to do anything I would not do myself." Silence stretched across the bridge. Then a young dragon named Vexkai stepped forward and saluted. "What are your orders, Commander?" Their first engagement came 3 days later, when a Vraktheri fleet moved to capture a mining station in the Outer Reach. Standard dragon tactics would have been to meet them head-on, matching ships and firepower until one side broke. Ellie did something different. She had her fleet play dead, powering down their engines and drifting among the debris of an old battlefield, waiting in silence while the enemy fleet passed them by. When the Vraktheri began their assault on the mining station, Ellie's ships came alive behind them, striking at their vulnerable rear sections and supply vessels before they even knew they were under attack. The battle was over in minutes. "This is not honorable," one of her officers protested, even as they counted the enemy ships they had destroyed. "We struck from hiding like criminals in the night. We won," Ellie replied. "And we did not lose a single ship. Is that not worth more than honor?" Word of her victory spread through the fleet, and with it came something the Draconer Empire had not felt in months: hope. Other commanders began requesting transfers to her battle group. Dragons who were tired of losing and willing to try something new. Ellie taught them everything she knew about human warfare. Lessons learned from history books she had read in the scrapyard. Stories of guerrilla fighters and resistance movements, and ordinary people who had defeated powerful enemies through cleverness and determination. She taught them that supplies were more important than glory, that a destroyed fuel depot was worth more than a dozen honorable duels. She taught them that fear was a weapon, that an enemy who did not know when or where you would strike was already half defeated. She taught them that change was not weakness, but strength. That adaptation was the key to survival in a universe that cared nothing for tradition. The tide of the war began to turn battle by battle. System by system, Ellie's tactics spread through the dragon fleets. And commanders who had scoffed at human thinking began to see its value. The Vractari, who had counted on their enemies fighting the way they always had, found themselves facing something new and terrifying. An ancient empire that had learned how to evolve. "You have given us something precious," Admiral Kethforus told Ellie after another victory. "You have reminded us that we were not always lords of the stars. That once we too were small and desperate and willing to do whatever it took to survive." Ellie looked out at the stars, at the empire that was slowly becoming her own. "That is what humans are good at," she said quietly. "Surviving." The final battle took place above the Vractari homeworld, where their entire remaining fleet had gathered for a last desperate stand. Ellie stood on the bridge of her flagship. But she was no longer the scared girl who had left New Appalachia 2 years ago. Scales had begun to emerge along her arms and face. Her eyes now glowed with inner fire, and when she spoke, wisps of flame curled from her lips. The transformation had been slow at first, so gradual that she barely noticed, but the healer said it was accelerating, that the dragon blood in her veins was finally asserting itself. She was becoming something new, something that had never existed before. A true hybrid of two species who had spent centuries as enemies. "The enemy fleet outnumbers us 3-1, Admiral Kethforus reported from beside her. "Standard tactics would recommend retreat and regrouping." "Good thing we do not use standard tactics," Ellie replied with a smile that showed teeth slightly sharper than they had been a year ago. The battle that followed would be remembered for 1,000 years. Sung in the halls of dragons and studied in the academies of a dozen species, Ellie divided her fleet into small, fast-moving groups that struck the enemy from every direction, never staying in one place long enough to be pinned down. She used the gravity wells of nearby moons to slingshot her ships at impossible speeds. She deployed decoys and sensor ghosts that made her forces seem 10 times their actual size. She targeted communications and command ships while ignoring the heavily armored battlecruisers. The Vractari did not know how to fight an enemy who refused to play by any rules they understood, hour by hour. Their formation crumbled. Their coordination fell apart. Their confidence shattered into fear and confusion when Ellie finally led her personal squadron against the enemy flagship. She did not hang back and direct the battle from safety as dragon tradition demanded. She was at the front of the assault, her ship weaving through defensive fire, her voice calm and steady as she gave orders that no dragon commander had ever given before. "Trust your instincts," she told her pilots. "Adapt to what you see. Do not wait for orders that might come too late." They punched through the enemy defenses and disabled the flagship's engines, leaving it drifting helplessly in space. The Vractari commander, a creature of scales and spines and cold reptilian eyes, appeared on the view screen with hatred burning in his gaze. "You have won nothing," he snarled. "You are still an abomination, a corruption of everything your kind once stood for. The dragons will never truly accept you." Ellie met his glare without flinching. "You are wrong," she replied. "I am not a corruption, I am an evolution. And your mistake was thinking that change makes us weaker when it actually makes us stronger." She ended the transmission and gave the order to accept the enemy's surrender. The war was over. Emperor Vormaketh died 3 days later, peacefully in his sleep. With Ellie holding his ancient claw, his last words were simple: "Make them better." The coronation of Empress Kearthana, the twice-born, took place in the same throne room where she had once stood as a frightened stranger, demanding respect she had not earned. Now she had earned it, in blood and fire and victory, and even Lord Therax knelt before her with something like genuine acceptance in his eyes. The crown was a circle of living flame that settled upon her head and did not burn, recognizing the blood of Vextharian that flowed through her hybrid veins. "My people," she said, looking out at the assembled dragons who had once debated whether she should be allowed to live. "We have won a war, but our true battle is only beginning. She raised one hand, and the flames of her crown flared higher. For 10,000 years, the Draconer Empire has remained unchanged. We have followed the same laws, observed the same traditions, maintained the same barriers between ourselves and the other species of the galaxy. We called this strength. But it was stagnation. Her voice rang through the vast chamber. I was raised among humans, and they taught me something your traditions never could. That change is not death, that adaptation is not weakness, that the courage to evolve is the greatest strength any species can possess. She gestured, and the great doors of the throne room swung open to reveal a delegation of humans standing nervously in the entrance. Marcus Vance was among them. Older now, his hair turned white, but his eyes bright with pride as he looked at the daughter he had saved from wreckage all those years ago. My first act as Empress is to open diplomatic relations with the human colonies, Ellie announced. Not as masters to servants, but as equals. As partners in a future we will build together. The court stirred with uncertainty, but no one protested. My second act is to abolish the caste system that has divided our people for millennia. From this day forward, no dragon will be judged by the circumstances of their birth, but by their actions and their character. Now there were murmurs of dissent, but Admiral Cathvarus stepped forward and placed herself beside the throne, and her presence silenced the doubters. Some of you will call these changes radical, Ellie continued. Some will say I am destroying everything that made us great. But I say we were not great because we stayed the same. We were great because we had the fire to reach for the stars. She looked at Marcus, at the man who had found her in wreckage and given her a home. My father found me in the ruins of a crashed ship, she said, her voice softening. He taught me that broken things can be rebuilt, that endings are also beginnings, that love does not require blood or species or tradition. Her gaze swept across the court, taking in dragons and humans standing together for the first time in history. The Draconer searched for a lost heir. They expected to find a dragon who would continue all the old ways, who would maintain the empire exactly as it had always been. She smiled, and fire danced in her eyes. Instead, they found me, a girl from a scrapyard who dreams of fire and stars, a hybrid who belongs to two worlds and is determined to bring them together, an empress who believes that the future is more important than the past. She rose from the throne, standing tall, her scales gleaming, her human heart beating strong. They found something better than what they were looking for. They found hope. They found change. They found the courage to become something new. She reached out her hands, one to Admiral Cathvarus, one to Marcus Vance. Dragon and human linked through her, and together, we will build an empire that the galaxy has never seen. An empire of fire and stars, of ancient wisdom and human adaptability, of tradition and transformation. She looked up at the sky, visible through the crystal ceiling of the throne room, at the stars that had always called to her. My name is Ellie Vance. I am also Kier Thana of the bloodline of Vextharian. And this is only the beginning. The court erupted in cheers, dragons roaring their approval, humans shouting their joy. Two species united under an empress who was both and neither and something entirely new and far away. On a backwater planet called New Appalachia, children looked up at the stars and dreamed of a universe where anything was possible, where a girl from a scrapyard could become an empress, where the greatest strength was not purity or tradition, but the courage to change. The future stretched out before them, bright and terrifying and full of hope, and Ellie smiled, because she knew that this was what humanity had always given the universe, the refusal to accept that any situation was hopeless, the creativity born from desperation, the willingness to evolve, the fire that burned in mortal hearts, brief but brilliant, lighting the way for all who came after. This was the gift of humanity. This was the new fire, and it would never go out.